Good morning, good afternoon, or good night, and welcome to Command Power, the show in which we discuss all things Magic the Gathering with a focus on Commander. And today we have a brand new deck for you, and just as a quick heads up, this is not a budget deck, although I do think it should be fairly easy to find substitutes for those expensive cards. But before that, just a quick reminder to please click like and subscribe if you enjoy my videos. We're well on our way to 1 million subscribers, and every single click counts. And today's video is going to be a little bit different because even though the commander of this deck is Carthalion, and he's quite an interesting commander in his own right, I wanted to talk a little bit about how you can make your deck building a bit more interesting, and that is by giving yourself restrictions. This is something that I found a lot lately. In the past, I've had lots of decks built around themes or particular cards and restrictions. For example, I had a Cody deck that ran no non-land permanents. That was a lot of fun. Another example was a Sharum the Hegemon deck, which I built because of my love of Esper and Shards of Alara, in which every card either was an artifact or had the word artifact in the text. Then there's more simple stuff such as having a Rurik Thar deck where all the cards were creatures, which meant that I was never going to take damage from Rurik Thar. All of these kinds of deck building restrictions can allow you to have a more fun experience and a more different kind of gameplay, particularly if you're a little bit tired of always seeing the same cards in Commander. You can also do it a little bit more loosely if you don't want to go so rigid. I also made a deck, for example, which was based on Ruhan of the Fomori, where most of the cards in the deck had the word random in them, so everything was just a bit chaotic and a bit random. That was a lot of fun to play. It wasn't the most powerful, but it was definitely an interesting deck. And the deck that I want to share with you today is built with that in mind. One of my favorite experiences that I ever had in Magic was going to the Alara Reborn pre-release, which was all multicolor, and I thought, why don't I make a deck like that? So this deck is completely hardcore strict. There are no exceptions. Every single card in the deck is a multicolor card. Because of this, I'm missing out on some of the most common payoffs that you can have for playing multicolor, which is a pity, but hey, I'm a slave to the theme and I wanted to see if I could make it work. I'm going to be playing it this weekend and hopefully it turns out to be a lot of fun. So with this deck, I'm going to basically tell you why I chose the cards I chose because of the restrictions that I had. So without further ado, let's get started. And we're starting off with Bant Shoreblade. This was one of the main things that I wanted to include in this deck because of my love for Alara Reborn. The whole cycle of 3-color hybrid 2-drops that get a bonus if you have another multicolor creature. They're basically always going to be on in this deck, and they actually work very well with our commander because they get 3 counters with his minus ability. Black Market Tycoon is very important in the deck because one of the main issues that I thought was going to be a problem is the mana base. Seeing as we can't really run mana rocks or conventional ramp of any sort, so this is going to make sure that we are getting a treasure every turn, which should help fix our mana. Bloodbraid Elf is a classic card from Alara, and since this deck is themed around Alara Reborn, it fits very well. Coiling Oracle was one that I stumbled across when I was getting close to finishing the deck. This can often be ramp, which is really solid since we don't have access to that many 2-drop ramp cards. Enigma Sphinx is another fun card from Alara Reborn. I'm really looking to cascade quite a bit in this deck, so this is nice because we get to use it over and over when it dies. Enlisted Worm is yet another classic Alara Reborn cascade card. Esper Stormblade is another of the Stormblade cycle. This one's quite good because flying is pretty relevant. Ethereum Horn Sorcerer is a nice cascade card that we can also rebuy if we have extra mana late game. Fabaro Elder is one of the best ramp cards we can have access to in an all multicolored deck because again, we can't use anything like Arcane Signet. Fallagia Wayfarer, I couldn't decide if it was okay to include because it technically does cost 2 and a green, but it is a multicolor card. So in the end, I decided I'd let myself put this one in the deck. It's also very powerful because it's going to allow you to convoke every spell in the deck. Super strong. General Ferrous Rockiric is one of the best creatures in this deck. This is an excellent payoff because again, every card we're playing is multicolor, so this is just a 4/4 every time we cast a spell. Similarly, Glory Scale Viashino is going to be really good in this deck. It can attack as a really huge creature because every spell we cast is going to give it +3/+3. Grixis Grimblade is one of the weaker ones of the Blade cycle because getting Death Touch doesn't really matter that much. Giant Engineer is very good ramp in this deck. It's essentially a mana rock that taps for 2 colors. Harmonic Sliver works well to remove an artifact or enchantment. We also have a very minor Sliver sub-theme, so this is okay. Inga and Essek is going to work so nicely in this deck. We're running a lot of creatures, and this helps fix our mana very well. Gigantha the Wellspring is a great mana producer in this deck. We have a lot of different colored symbols, so this should almost always give us 2 to 3 usable mana per turn, which is great. Jensen Carthalion Druid Exile is a fantastic payoff for multicolor cards. Scrying every spell we cast is obviously great. It's also good that it filters our mana very nicely, and since we do have quite a few 5-color spells, this can actually start pumping out angels as well. Stranded Hackblade is one of the better blade cards because getting haste out of nowhere can often be really useful, particularly in the early game. Catilda Dawnheart Prime taps herself for mana, which is very nice, but we are running quite a few humans, so this can fix our mana quite nicely, and then late game it's a nice mana sink that can grow our team. Knight of New Alara is going to be really good in a deck with only multicolor creatures. It's going to buff all of our creatures by quite a bit. Buffer Corrupt Sheriff is a good way to fix our mana. It's going to give us a lot of treasures, which means that we should be ramping as well with this. Maelstrom Archangel is a fun finisher that can allow us to cast stuff for free. Marrowleaf Pixie is a card that you wouldn't normally run, but we do have to dig a little bit deep for our ramp, and this gives us 2 colors. Naya Hushblade has Shroud, which can be pretty annoying, particularly if we get to put 3 counters on it with our commander. Necrotic Sliver is another part of our Sliver package. It can allow us to destroy permanents, which is always useful. Niv Mizzet Reborn should actually draw us quite a few cards on average. I'm hoping to get 2 or 3 draws off of this from most casts, which would be very good. Omnath Locus of All is obviously fantastic. We're running a lot of cards with 3 different mana symbols in them, so this is going to provide us a lot of mana, and even if it doesn't, it's always drawing us an extra card. Primeval Spawn is an excellent finisher that can also gain us a ton of life. Its only downside is make sure that you don't get it stolen. Rien, Angel of Rebirth, provides a nice little bit of protection to all of our creatures, as well as buffing them. Prison Reef is a good card in its own right that can basically ramp us just like Coiling Oracle can, but we're also running a couple more elementals, so it can get some extra value out of there too. Root Coil Creeper is one of the best ramp cards we can have because it provides mana of any color. Selvala Explorer Returned is a nice little ramp card that can also draw us a few cards. Steward of Valoron is probably the worst ramp card in the deck, but I couldn't bring myself to cut this because it reminds me of so many good times playing Shards of Alara. Stormfist Crusader is a card that I really like, but often can't find a place for, but in this deck it's going to work nicely as a source of card draw. Thalia and the Gitrog monster does so many different things for us, and it does them all very well. It makes combat very difficult for our opponents, allows us to ramp a little bit, and can even sacrifice stuff to draw cards. The First Liver is a card that I've wanted to include in a bunch of decks lately because I got the Secret Lair. It's got great stats, and we are running a Cascade theme, and we also have a couple more slivers to just get a little bit more value out of it. And finally, we had Two-Headed Hellkite, which is a great payoff for a 5-color deck. Drawing cards every single turn is great. Moving on to sorceries, we have Bring to Light, which is an excellent tutor in this deck. We can find a finisher, a board wipe, or any sort of targeted removal that we need with this, and just get so much value by playing it instantly. Reborn Hope can rebuy any card in our graveyard, which is great. Supply and Demand, we're mostly running for the demand side, which again is going to be an amazing tutor in this deck. And moving on to instants, we have Boros Charm, which is great board wipe protection. Bound and Determined is a really useful one. It gives us a little bit of protection against counterspells, which is always nice, but we're mostly running it for bound, because if we sacrifice a 5-color creature in response to something, we can return 5 cards from our graveyard to our hand. That's obviously really great. Cosmic Rebirth is a nice regrowth effect that can even return permanents to the battlefield if we needed to. Golgari Charm is another way to deal with board wipes, which is always great. Growth Spiral does a really good impression of a ramp effect in this deck. Kaya's Guile does a lot of stuff and does most of it very well. We definitely want a way to deal with our opponent's graveyard. Obscura Charm is really great because it reanimates any multicolored permanent with mana value 3 or less at instant speed. Prismari Command does a lot of things, but I mostly have it in there for the ramp effect. And moving on to enchantments, we have Binding the Old Gods, which can ramp us a little bit and fix our mana a little, whilst also providing a bit of removal for non-land permanents. Maelstrom Nexus is going to be really solid when we're cascading turn after turn. Temur Ascendancy is going to give all of our creatures haste, which is obviously great, and it's also a great way to draw some extra cards because we do have some high-powered creatures. And Trace of Abundance has got to be one of the best multicolor ramp effects at 2 mana. Moving on to battles, we're obviously running Invasion of Alara, which is my favorite invasion by far. It's super sweet. It provides so many different things, and I just love this card. We're also running Invasion of Urgamon, which provides us a nice little bit of card selection and early ramp, and if we get to flip it, we can actually pitch a card to search for Invasion of Alara, which I love. Moving on to Planeswalkers, we have Dakon Shadow Slayer. This is a very solid good stuff card that can deal with creatures turn after turn and also filter our draws. And we're also running Quintorius Can. Seeing as we're running a lot of cascade effects, this should work very nicely, and it can also discover by itself, which is always fun. So there you have it. That has been my Jared Carthalion deck tech. I just wanted to show you guys what a deck can look like when you work with a lot of restrictions. I'm actually super excited to play this. It's going to give me a lot of nostalgia seeing all of those old cards from the Alara days. What do you think? Are there any kind of projects that you're working towards? Any unusual decks that you want to build? Let me know in the comments section below. I read all comments and respond to all of them too. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to click like or subscribe. It really helps the channel. And until next time, take care.